This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Moore. I got a confession to make. Probably to my wife Kimmy's great chagrin many times. Probably my favorite folk/acoustic artist of the 1970s is Gordon Lightfoot. I can't help myself. I could listen to him for hours and hours. And she can tolerate it for a while, but she gets weary. I understand. But there's something about the music that he creates. And I had kind of an interesting intersection with Gordon Lightfoot's music and my travels. I was out in Arizona many years ago. And I was at an educational conference, and we had to get out of town. It was in the middle of July. We were in Phoenix, and it was broiling hot. And we decided to take a trip to Sedona, where it's about 40 degrees cooler. And along the way, I looked up, and I saw a sign that said Carefree Highway. And suddenly it came to me that this was the stretch of road that Gordon, or Gordo as he's known, wrote the lyrics to the song, his hit from the 70s, Carefree Highway. And that song means a lot to me. It's so peaceful. But I'm going to talk about a case today that is so utterly bizarre from what we know at this point. And it happens not too far away from that stretch of highway, Carefree Highway, but the circumstances around this case are anything but carefree. And to this moment, there's a killer among them out there. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. Dave, please tell me that you like Gordon Lightfoot.
You know, if you really want to go down that, I'll throw out Kathy Evelyn Smith. If you really want to play Gordon Lightfoot.
I knew it. I knew you were going to go there. The ruiner of men.
And she actually is the one who gave John Belushi the speedball that killed him, and then sold her story to the National Enquirer, and that reopened the investigation. Thomas Noguchi got involved, and they locked her up. There you go. So, yes, I am a Gordon Lightfoot fan. But, hey, I did not know the story about Carefree Highway. I did not know that about Arizona, but I do know this. When you live out there in the Southwest, it is a different landscape than other parts of the country, because more than just flat and desert. You know, it's just, I encourage everyone to spend some time in New Mexico and Arizona. There are plenty of things to see. Historical, there's stuff that dates back, Native American stuff that goes back a long time ago. Just an amazing time. But today's case, Joe, we're talking about it because it happened in Maricopa County, Arizona, which is a big county. Phoenix is in Maricopa County, but the area we're talking about is a very small area, very not densely populated, where there's a man who had served in Vietnam, and he came back home, and after his tour in Vietnam, he became a religious man and studied and became a pastor. And for the last 25 years, he has pastored this small area church. He is one of those people that is called a beloved pastor, a beloved member of the community. He's a salt of the earth kind of guy who liked to rebuild trucks, Joe. If you actually look at pictures of his property, there's parts of vehicles all over the place that he's using to put others back together. It's what he and his son do. It's a passion project they have. But his passion of being a pastor for many, many years, 25 years, his wife passed away a couple of years ago in 2022. He's now 76 years old. William Schoneman is the man's name. Pastor William Schoneman was found dead on April 28th. It was a 911 call, Joe, and I need your help on this because I've been trying to figure out who the finder was, and I can't see it. I don't find that, but I do know this. The Maricopa County Sheriff's Office is being quiet. They have locked their lips on this case. All we know is that it appeared that this pastor of 25 years was staged like a crucifixion in his own bed.
Yep.
And it was a 911 call that came in from somebody, and that's how they found him. We'll get more in details, but that is the setup that boggles the mind in an area where the people all said, we don't lock our doors at night.
Yeah.
We all know one another.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's actually off of, I think it's I-17, if I'm not mistaken. It's a major interstate highway that runs north. It heads to Sedona, which, by the way, going back to Arizona, arguably is one of the most beautiful places I've been out west. I spent time in Arizona in the Army at Fort Huachuca down on the Mexican border. Not beautiful.
I was going to ask you about that. I didn't realize you were stationed there.
Yeah. I went through AIT there in the Army and did training at the Intel school, and that was many moons ago. There were nice parts to it. Very hot, not as hot as Phoenix though.
Yeah.
Wow. It's. I've never experienced heat like Phoenix, even compared to Vegas. Phoenix is down in a bowl, and it's not sultry because they would say there's no humidity, but you bake, you absolutely bake. And it takes a special kind of person to be there outdoors in the summertime. But this case in particular is north of Phoenix. And it's really interesting because as you're going northbound out of Phoenix, you can actually appreciate the road beginning to rise, Dave, because Phoenix sits down in a bowl. So it you can feel it's one of those weird situations when you're on a highway. Generally, you can't detect elevation changes, but all the way from Phoenix to Sedona, you could actually appreciate the elevation change. And then when we hit Sedona, it was, I think, like 68, and we had left Phoenix that was like 118, and you can feel it and even the car temperature reader, the digital thing in there, is progressively going down as you go down the road. But Sedona is one of the most beautiful places I've been to. You actually, it's a very kind of, you feel, I don't know how to say it. It's almost like an outdoor cathedral when you get there. You feel close to God. Yeah, I don't know about that, but I know that I felt a lot of peace there. And if I was an alien, I would want to visit Sedona. So I enjoyed it. I love it, and got a lot of friends out in Arizona. But this case in particular, because it is, even though it's in Maricopa County, and it's, just north of arguably one of the largest cities in the United States. I think for a while, Phoenix was right up there at like number 5 or 6. I'm sure I've got listeners that are out there. They'll say, no, we're not at that position. But that's roughly kind of where the population stood. But when you get out of that area, all of a sudden, dude, you're away from everything else that's developed really, really quickly. I've never seen it change like that. That's unique to that area, I think. And as you head north, you get away from the artificial light of Phoenix, and you're out there in that desert, and it's like the stars at night. They just feel so much more illuminated. You feel closer to the heavens almost. You can see more. It's absolutely breathtaking. I think a lot of it has to do with lack of humidity, whereas down here in the South, we've got beautiful views at night, but it's nothing. And I know you lived in New Mexico. There's nothing that really compares to like a Western sky. And thinking about that, I believe that whoever did this, because this would have taken time, would have had to been very, very familiar with this poor pastor's house, his comings and goings. They would have needed to have a lot of privacy. Maybe they did it in the cover of night, because I've been in the desert at night and have no need for a flashlight whatsoever, particularly in like the more sandy areas. The light seems to reflect up off of it. It's a unique world. It's almost surreal when you get out there. But I was thinking about this when you begin to think about pastors and their deaths, particularly as are related to something that is so, I don't know, it has a posed feeling to it. There's a real creepy element. Every pastor that I have ever worked as a death investigator, there was some kind of weird spiritual attachment that would occur. I'm not saying this happened in this man's case, But for instance, I had a suicide where a guy was like the head deacon in a church, and he had taken talcum powder and poured it out on the floor and created a pentagram and ended his life in the middle of the thing because he felt like that he had committed these unforgivable sins. I've had people that were pastors that were killed specifically because of people that were parishioners in their local church that didn't agree with them or hated them. There was some kind of conflict with them. And then, of course, I've had those that were, had essentially, I think, on one level abandoned God and had created were involved in illicit behaviors with individuals, many times taking their own lives. But Dave, that's not what this sounds like. To me, at least on the surface of it, it sounds as though that somebody had it in for him, because we do know this. And we're going to have a session here pretty soon, an episode of Body Bags that's really going to correct language that the press and that the authorities use many times. They have ruled, and I've seen multiple articles that have said that William Schoneman died of homicide. He did not die of homicide. His death is a homicide. It's just that at this point, they haven't told us specifically what the modality was. I think probably the most beautiful cross I've ever seen in my life is in South Carolina at a place I used to attend, YMCA camp, when I was a little boy. It used to be called Camp Greenville YMCA. It's owned by a private company now, and people put up pictures of it all the time. And it's a place called Pretty Place. And there is a gigantic cross on a rock outcropping that they've turned into an outdoor chapel. And it overlooks like Caesar's head and these weird rock formations that are up there. Beautiful, beautiful cross that's there at the, essentially where the altar would be. Views are just fantastic. I cannot begin to imagine what it would be like to walk into a scene where this beloved man, and I have to assume that some of the people that were out there, even the authorities, Dave, would have known him and have entered into his residence and have seen him in this condition. It baffles the mind. And I think that it really says a lot about the person. And I don't mean in a good way. I mean, there's some kind of relational thing that's going on here that's actually very, very chilling, Dave.
The one thing that has consistently come in the reporting is how it is described. And I'm going to share one thing with you, because this is something that has been shared on a number of different sites, and this is the exact wording. The preacher was lying dead on his bed. His arms were spread out, and his hands were pinned to the wall in a faux crucifixion that sickened even veteran homicide detectives. That's the opening line, because the staging of this body, and you have taught me about posing bodies and things and how they are staged for dramatic effect to truly impact those who find the body. What we don't know about this case are the details. All we have been told is that what you just heard, that information was given out right away, but they immediately said the community is not at risk.
Right. I think that's fascinating. That? Yeah. That's fascinating, because that's a huge conclusion to draw. Because I got to tell you, I don't care if I'm living 5 miles away from this guy, I'm worried. If I've got a family, I'm worried. But you're telling me not to worry because they're saying that the public is not in danger. There's nothing to fear. And so by saying that, de facto, what you're implying as a public safety official is that this is something that was at the hand of either somebody that is known to them, or there was some kind of indication that was left at the scene that this was not related to anybody else in the community. and that this individual has, I don't know, flown the coop, if you will. They're no longer there posing a danger because, dude, I'm not saying I'd sleep with a firearm underneath my pillow. However, it would be one of my first inclinations, I think, because if I've got this guy, as you stated, in a rural area where they don't lock their doors, what type of perpetrator would be able to come into an environment like this and feel comfortable enough to, quote unquote, pin the hands to the wall? And this is another little point of order here, Dave. When I say the term pinning, okay, just extrapolate from that. I'd love to hear it from you. What does that imply to you?
Well, that's actually in my notes to ask you, because when I first heard about this and it said pinned, I'm thinking of how you put pressure on the hands and push against something, whether it's the floor and you're giving your brother the spit treatment, or it's against the wall to hold something there. That to me is pinned. There is something holding the hand to the wall. And if the arms are outstretched, and this is in some type of a crucifixion nod, did they actually pin it with nails?
Yeah.
Did they? They're not saying that. I'm just saying I don't know what pinned actually means in this regard.
You start throwing around image. You start vocalizing imagery like in the form of a crucifixion, and you start using the term pinned with the hands. Automatically, I'm thinking, well, is there what type of? Okay, let's just say this. I guess you could take someone that is dead and put super glue on the back of their hands and glue their hands to the wall, or epoxy if you were so inclined. Maybe you could tie them in some weird way. I don't know. Maybe he had hooks on his wall and they were tied to the wall, but that's not what that means to me, because pinning, it just, let's think about a common term that's used in our vernacular. You're in a meeting and somebody says, I tell you what, let's put a pin in that for right now. Oh, when you put a pin in something, that means that you're taking a metal object, generally sharp, and you stick it to hold it in place. Now, maybe I'm going to turn out to be way off base here, but all of the imagery that this is kind of conjuring up here, Dave, it certainly gives us pause, doesn't it, to think about it. Who would want to do this? And I think one of the big questions I'm going to have to ask, Dave, and I'm going to go here, this pinning. Is the pinning ante-mortem or is it post-mortem? Because if it's ante-mortem, how are you going to get this guy? And granted, how old did you say William was?
He's 76 years old.
Okay.
76,
He's in his mid-70s. He's Vietnam vet. We know that he works outside with his hands. It's not like he's couch potato. This guy wrestles around engine parts, all right? So he's no, I don't know. He's not. He is
not a dandelion.
No, he's not a dandelion. You're absolutely right. He's out there working in the hot sun, doing what he loves. If you put your hands on him, then you're going to have a problem. Now, listen, problem might not last a long time, but dude's going to resist. I can tell you that. So if he is being pinned in some manner that they're referring to, then was this done before he died? If it's done before he died, Dave, then we've opened up a completely different can of worms here, because being pinned in life with an object, you're approaching, or maybe you're smack dab in the middle of what I would say is torture. If there's torture involved, I have to say that there is an inordinate amount of anger involved. And maybe we begin to paint a picture of who's involved in this as far as a perpetrator or perpetrators. Now, we can't just simply say that it's one person that did this. All right. Because I got to tell you, if hands are pinned and you're doing it to somebody that is alive, like Christ was, you're going to have to hold their arm down while somebody else pins them to this surface. Now, if it's post-mortem, that means if it happened after death, then what do we make of that? Well, I've had serial killings where bodies, you mentioned this before, where bodies have been posed. Many times it's for the shock value. As crazy as it is, I think back to that movie back in the 90s with Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman, Seven. And for those of you that are familiar with that movie, each one of those, well, first off, each one of those deaths represented one of the 7 deadly sins. And every one of those bodies in some way was kind of posed. And it was meant to be a shocking event. Most serialized events that use posing, first off, the individual is in a fantasy world that does it, or they are attempting to shock the finder, whoever that might be. Well, we have to look at a list and say, well, who could have been the finder in this case? Who would have intimate enough contact with him? And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. I'm saying who has access and opportunity to him at any moment in time. You'd mentioned that, his son worked with him. Well, did his son find his daddy like this? Is his son the one that walked into the house? Say again?
You think we'd be told that, though, that he was found by his son? Because we're not getting that. I spent a lot of time trying to find the finder because a 911 call comes in around 7:30 at night on the 28th of April. And that 911 call was about finding him dead. But we don't know who made the call or why the call was made. See, I was looking to see if this was another one of our making a welfare check call, because the guy, I'm going to assume, and this is always the wrong thing to do, I just haven't seen anything different to imply that somebody's living with him. So I found out his wife passed in 2022. So for the last couple of years, it's just been him, and he was found. But here's the other part, Joe, is that besides the body being posed, besides the hands being pinned to the wall, we also are being told that his body had other significant injuries. And in some of the reports, they've gone so far to say his body was mutilated. So we've got what killed him? We don't know. They don't say he was shot in the head and then posed. They don't tell us how he died. He could have been alive. Maybe it was a staged crucifixion and they let him bleed out. We don't know. We don't know anything other than that a man who was generally loved by the community, a community of 17,000 people, about, 55 miles outside of Phoenix, a man that everybody respected, knew, and cared for, a pastor nonetheless for the last 25 years, and he's done this way in such a disrespectful post. And then the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office tells us, don't worry about it. It's a one-off, meaning they have to know something, right? To say that I don't need to lock my doors, I don't need to get worried. Because I'm going to be honest, Joe, if it happens across the street in my neighborhood, I'm moving a shotgun to the front door.
Yeah, you have to think that that every lead has been exhausted at this point in time, and I find it was kind of interesting. William's son, he actually went by Bill. Bill's son, Randy, had stated that they've been getting a lot of support and that people are reaching out to try to help them because, Bill was the type of guy that helped people, obviously, in his congregation. I think that, I don't think it's too far to say that they had become a de facto family for him, particularly in the wake of the loss of a wife like this. This was his life. Who in the world would want to do this level of harm to this poor man that, in my opinion, involves restraint, possibly torture, and ultimately murder? There's been some controversy over the years about the crucifixion of Christ, about where the injuries were specifically on his body. Some people have held that he was perhaps nailed through his wrist because the bones of the hand could not support a body. And then, I think that we have scripture, Dave, you can chime in on this, that says that, and I think it was Thomas, that came to Christ, and he said, because he wasn't present when Christ appeared, he said, until I touch, or is it place my finger into the nail-scarred hands or touch his side, I'm not going to believe. And so this opens up an interesting kind of valve in this whole thing, logistically, how you're going to work the scene as an investigator. Was I right scripturally, by the way?
Yeah. And boy, we're going to be playing with, people love to debate things word for word about the Bible. And I'm just going to tell you this. The Bible wasn't written in English. Jesus didn't speak English. Yeah. And although the red letters are beautiful, and those are the words he said, they weren't said in English. Just saying. Now, to get to this, I'm wondering, Joe, in my head, I'm picturing the scene and I'm trying to figure out, how do you go about beginning to investigate what took place when you've got a body that's staged and you're going to destroy evidence the first time you move in? Because
you are.
The body being staged is evidence in and of itself.
Yeah, you are. And here's a little aside for you here, my friend. You never know, I think, as an investigator, what kind of tools you're going to need when you show up at a scene, because people have a way when they die, either at their own hand or at the hand of another, of putting themselves in these odd positions where it's something that scientifically you're not calculating that. When you go out to a scene and you walk in, I had a guy that was stuck down into a grease trap one time trying to break into a building and got stuck over a stove, and he actually cooked to death over a stove at a Jamaican restaurant. He had second, third degree burns on his lower body. Well, myself and the fire department had to try to come up with a way to dislodge him, if you will, from this trap. So you never know, from the grease trap, you never know what you're going to encounter and what kind of tools you're going to need. And I'm thinking about this case, and again, we don't know this for a fact, but let's just look at it from the perspective of talking about destroying evidence. If we have to unpin him, which we would have to, because the body's going to go to the Maricopa County Medical Examiner's Office. By the way, one of the finest medical examiner's offices in the nation, bar none. I mean, they have for years had this stellar reputation there of doing fantastic work. Because if you're going to transport him back, what are you going to do? Cut the wall out over the bed and leave him pinned in this position? You can't do that. Now, we have had to do certain things where we cut walls out to recover projectiles. Let's see, what else have we done in the past? We've left bodies inside of burned cars and transported those bodies. I've had pipes sticking out of bodies where I had to transport the body with the pipe still in place. I've had tree branches where people have been impaled on and just took a chainsaw and cut so that I left like a foot on each side of the body. And transported the body in with that in place so that we could x-ray it and just have an understanding of what organ systems it passed through before we ever put the cold steel to the body. This is different, though. You've got a body that is anchored. I like that term maybe a little bit better than pinned. That's anchored to the wall. I don't know what kind of anchoring mechanism they were using. Okay, and let's just think about, we'll go back to the example of Christ. Okay, we think about traditionally the spikes that had been used. Now, those are very bold, when you think about it, and would require something other than, say, a finishing hammer that a carpenter would have to use. You're talking about using something that would approximate a handheld a sledgehammer or a ball peen hammer or something like that. Or was it simply that they took roofing nails, or they used, you name it, concrete nails, or whatever the case might be. And there are a variety of different sizes of nails. Well, how am I going to dislodge his hand from that anchor point? You know what I'm going to do first? I am probably not going to pull the nail out of the hand. I'm going to try to get his hand with the nail in place dislodged from the wall. And the purpose in doing that is that I want to be able to, in a controlled environment, extract or take x-rays of the hands. Okay, first off, we're documenting it, right? We can appreciate the wound track with the object in place. Secondly, I'm documenting it. Can you imagine how powerful that is in court? You're not going to show, you don't have to show a bloody photograph at autopsy. All you have to do is take that radiograph and put it up on the board. Defense can't argue about that because the prosecution would say, Dr. Smith, what are you seeing here? What is this object? It's a nail, and they'll give the specific type of nail. And how is it in there? Well, sir, I got to tell you, it appears that it was hammered through the victim's hand and into the wall where it was pinned. So based upon this, what's your assessment? Well, the doctor will say one of two things, Brother Dave. He's either going to say that there is a wound track with hemorrhage associated with it, or there's no hemorrhage in there. And so we'll be able to understand contextually, was he alive or was he dead when this happened? And if he has all of these other injuries that you have referred to that they keep mentioning, we don't precisely know what those injuries are, but let me just run down a list of what could happen. If you've got injuries that have been inflicted on a body of an individual that is restrained, even if they're restrained with nails, it could be beating, it could be cutting, it could be stomping, it could be punching. There's a number of things that would manifest themselves on the body, because I can't imagine why else you would want to pin this individual to a wall. So what are the nature of those injuries as well? And each one of those injuries will be assessed. And another piece to this that's going to be hugely important, Dave, we know that he's laying on a bed. This is not like he's laying in the dirt or even hung on a Christian cross, okay? He's laying on a bed, on a mattress. Guess what? A mattress is like a plowed garden where seed has been put out. If you imagine the surface of the mattress as a plowed garden with furrows in it, and seeds are bits of evidence, and it holds onto it, it gets into the dirt, into the strata of the mattress. That mattress is going to be invaluable, because when you think about all of the activity, someone would probably have had to have gotten onto that mattress in order to facilitate the positioning of the hands. If it's more than one person, you're going to have one person holding while the other person is putting the pins, quote unquote, in place, or even tying, whatever the nature of this is. So the mattress is really going to come in place. You're going to have a lot of blood evidence, I would imagine. You're probably going to have tissue and hair that comes from this victim's body. In addition to that, whatever else the perpetrator or perpetrators had on them is going to transfer. And let me tell you one more thing, going back to Lacard's principle, whatever they did to Bill in that bed will have transferred to them as well. So if they're out there and they're still wearing the same clothes because this person sounds like a madman or mad people, maybe they've retained the clothing. If not, maybe they've disposed of it. But if that clothing can be found, you would have to explain why Bill's biological evidence is on there. And I'm talking everything from hair, blood, skin, and of course, everybody's favorite, DNA. This is going to be an evidence-rich environment. I'm going to be very interested, I think, first off, to see who may have visited Bill's church. There was a reference that was made to a sermon that he had preached, and we don't really know what the context of the sermon was or what the topic was or even what the scripture reading was, but we know that he had given his last sermon. Well, Dave, this is not too far away from an interstate highway. What if somebody had said, you know what? I think I'm going to go into this little town. I'm going to roll up to this church. I'm going to go in and listen to what they have to say. And maybe something clicked with that individual. Maybe it was something that really angered them. And they said, okay, I'm going to come back and I'm going to get this guy. It could be that simple.
Wow.
Or that complex. So you have all of these things that kind of run through your mind. The church has progressively over the last few years become a very dangerous place. We've had pastors, priests, shot, stabbed, beaten to death, all these sorts of things. You never know who's lurking outside and who is going to be inside. You think of it as a place of peace, a refuge, a cleft in the rock, if you will, to get away from the storms of life. But unfortunately, in this case, in this place that Bill had called home for all of these years, where he had lived a life, where he had assembled old cars, even worked on planes, a place of peace he had found after the war in Vietnam, a place where his wife had passed away. There's a pervasive evil that has been visited upon this man of God. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.